Shalom. Welcome to the Jewish View. My name is Rabbi Nachman Simon with the Chabad House of Delmer, together with my co-host Mark Ronich of Statewide News Service and jbiztechvalley.com. Welcome, Mark. We have a very, very special guest with us, Mr. Stephen Axelrod. You are the chairman of the board of our community school. Charter school.
That's it.
Steve, welcome to the Jewish View. Listen, let's start with the basic idea. What is a charter school? For our viewers out there, I'm sure they heard the name and, school here, school there. What's the special? What is a charter school and what's the arc?
Okay, the charter school is a public school that is awarded a charter by the state of New York, in this case, and given an operating license for 5 years with a certain set of goals in mind, a certain performance contract that is agreed by both parties, and then we receive money per pupil for each of the students we enroll. So the money follows the student, through the district to us. And so it's a public school, though it's run privately, in effect.
Who gets to choose who gets in there? The pupils.
Like
you say, it's private. It's interesting thing, public or private.
Well, it's privately run. It's just not publicly run. It's a not-for-profit. It's a 501c3 corporation. So it's a just like the United Way or the UJA. It's a privately run.
But your administration picks who want to let go there. Take a child. I'd like to go to this.
Part of our contract with the state is what admission preferences we're allowed to use. So we are allowed to use. The first preference is for students who are basically living in poverty in the city of Troy, which is our home school district, and then it's students living in poverty outside of Troy, and then students living in Troy, and then students outside, living outside of Troy. So those are our admissions preferences. We've always had a long waiting list, so basically it is largely students living in poverty in the city of Troy.
What about educational? You test the children. We want the A and B students, forget the C and D students.
We do not do that.
Really?
No, we're that's not who we are. Our community charter school particularly is an outgrowth of an after-school program that was started in the Troy Housing Projects about almost 40 years ago now by an ex-nun and an ex-priest who decided to carry their mission forward that way. Ran a wonderful nationally recognized after-school program. When the charter school law was passed about 15 years ago, started putting together a plan to take what they were doing in the after-school program and turn it into a charter school. So that's where we are.
And you came on in 2000.
I came on around 2000, exactly.
And then you hired, your responsibility was to bring the staff together?
No, that's really the principals. Mary Teresa Streck, who's one of our co-founders, one of our co-applicants, and also the principal, really
helped
runs
to organize
the
the board.
I helped organize the board.
And you served as the first chair.
And I continue to serve as the chair.
Right, first and only, okay.
Yep. Back to the administration, you get teachers, they're unionized, or you just pick your own teachers?
We can unionize or our teachers can unionize if they choose. We do not have a union, but we pay the going rate. So we pay whatever it takes to get the top teachers in this area.
So teachers are on the waiting list too?
Well,
I'm just
yes,
saying
absolutely.
That teachers would like to
we
be
have
at the charter
both
school.
in every room. We have both a full teacher and a teacher's aide. Frequently, almost overwhelmingly, the teacher's aides all have master's degrees in education. Unfortunately, the market for teachers in this area is poor, so we're able to hire fabulous people even as teachers' aides, incredibly credentialed.
What I found interesting looking at your website is you have 49 staff members, all the way down to maintenance and the cook and all that. But out of the teachers, you have one male teacher in grade 6 and one male teacher assistant in creative movement. And all the rest, you have 3 other men working at the school. Who's a cook manager, a kitchen assistant, and maintenance. But as far as the education side, you have 2 men, and the rest are all women. Is that intentional? Did it just more women in the profession?
I would imagine. I would imagine that probably more graduates of education schools are women than men, but I don't know that for a fact. We don't discriminate in any way.
I'm not suggesting.
There is at least one other man on the staff I know of.
Okay.
But your point is very well taken, I think. I
Okay.
don't have an answer.
Okay,
It's
no
a good
problem.
question.
That's
So the charter schools, there's always this argument, again, and I'm talking from, just I want to know the knowledge about should they, like you say, the charter's only for 5 years and they have to reevaluate it. What is it they're going to reevaluate? Your performance as a school?
They judge our performance as a school, exactly.
And it's through testing? Just almost, is
It
that
is-
like Common Core in a way?
In your initial, after you have your first 5-year charter, there is weight given to the program itself as well as the test results. After that initial rechartering, it's overwhelmingly the test results.
But so are you giving the same curriculum as public school, but just a little better, or you're making your own curriculum?
We use commercially available curriculum. We use a lot of the same sources the public school will use. We have, I think, we have a teaching staff that's second to none. We have a phenomenal administration, and we have a very, very low student-to-teacher ratio.
right.
We have 20 kids in a room and 2 professionals. Virtually all, not 100%, but virtually all of our teachers are certified. Most of them have master's degrees. It's that level of involvement with the students.
I would think it would be like Maimonides Hebrew Day School,
Which is our Jewish day school in the area.
and you don't necessarily use the curriculum of the Albany High School or Hackett
Well, they
Middle
have a
School.
Regents. You have to take a Regents.
You have to take a Regents, but you teach it in your own way.
Yeah, all right.
And then
So
you
But are the
so
kids
that,
more motivated? I mean, the parents should be more motivated if they're signing up for this special program. Do you see that with the children also? Because you can have the best curriculum you want, and like I'm a little, part-time teacher too. If the kid doesn't want, like you say, hey, I don't want this Jewish subjects, let me out of here. Or you can have the smartest kid and the best curriculum, and they're not going to learn. So maybe it's a motivated student going to charter school.
We try to motivate the students. They don't always walk in the door that way. A lot of times they come to us having had bad experiences in the public schools, so they need to have both their self-confidence built back up again and their trust built back up again. But we do it. It's sort of who we are, what we are.
and how do your scores relate to the scores of the city school district?
In 4 out of the last 5 years, not counting the Common Core, we very clearly outperformed the Troy district
Okay.
in both
Are
ELA
you
and
for
math.
the Common Core once we bring, I know that's a whole kettle of worms also, especially it's a big issue nowadays, but once you brought it up over here, I mean, are you for it, against it? I also don't have any views on it. I know some people are totally against it, and obviously.
Well, I'm not a teacher, so let
Right,
me
yeah.
preface it with that. What I think the Common Core, brings is a very, very high expectation and a very high level of outcomes. Common Core is really about outcomes. It's not a curriculum so much as a set of outcomes. I think they will, once it is fully rolled out and fully absorbed in effect by the system, both charter schools and district schools, it'll be a very positive, change. I think it raises the standards in ways that are very, very good. I think the rollout is quite flawed. So to have 6th graders taking, or even higher, our kids are, go up to 6th grade, but to have 6th graders taking a math test or an ELA test, with 1 year of this new method, whereas, they had 5 or 6 years of the old method, it's pretty brutal. What we see is that the kids coming up, the kindergartners, the 2nd graders, the 1st graders, are really learning wonderfully well. And they're performing. They will perform.
It takes time to integrate the system.
Yeah, because all they know is the Common Core. You take a kid like that as opposed to a 5th grader, and we had enormous pushback from the kids because they felt that they weren't prepared for the test. Their sense of appropriateness was really sort of violated.
Giving them a test the first few days of school just to have a gauge, and then seeing how they performed at the end of the school year.
Well,
And,
part of the problem with Common Core is that none of us knew what the Common Core test was going to be like until last year. It wasn't as if we had tests,
That's
to really
Like
work
teachers
with.
have like practice regions, so they could see the pretty
Yeah,
much
I mean,
in the ballpark
the
what
questions
they're
from
gonna
old
ask.
tests are the ones that you sort of
Yeah, but
end up
this-
practicing
well,
with, and this was the first year of the rollout.
What I was going to get at was the fact that the students would come home demoralized after that first exam in the very beginning of the school year and saying, I didn't know any of this, I didn't know what I'm doing. They would be crying, and then all of a sudden, the parents would say, well, don't worry about it. It was just, what do they call, there's some term that they use to set the the bar.
Baseline.
And then at the end of the school year, you want to see how much they are.
Yeah, I think
how much more they've improved from what the baseline
You
was.
know, I think the Common Core has a lot of very positive elements. I think the rollout was flawed,
Yeah.
and we're working our way through it. You know, all
So-
schools are.
The State University of New York has this Charter School Institute.
Yes.
And they regulate the charter
They're
schools?
one of 3 groups that in New York State that regulate or authorize charter schools. There's State Ed and the State University of New York, and then also the Department of Education in New York City.
In New York City?
In New York City. They
would have...
They
wouldn't-
grant a lot of charters down in New York.
Right.
You know, SUNY and State Ed also grant charters to schools in New York.
In New York City?
In New York City.
But up here, it would only be the other two?
It would only be State Ed or SUNY.
Okay. So you're going through an issue now, or
We are going through an issue now.
Could you
yes.
explain it? Because I don't want
I can. We're up for rechartering. The Charter Schools Institute issued a recommendation that we not be renewed. We appealed
Your
that.
personal school, you mean?
Yes, my school. We appealed that to the SUNY trustees. The Committee on Charter Schools, which is a 3-man, in this case all men, a 3-person committee, and there was a split decision. 1 voted in favor of renewing us in effect, 2 voted in upholding the recommendation from the Charter Schools Institute. We have appealed that, but the possibilities for appeal are very, very limited when you're appealing a decision by an administrative group such as this. So we have basically, today we just found out that a temporary stay that we had from the Court of Appeals was not instituted, was not
granted.
So basically, you know, our last day of school was Friday, and we will have to close, it looks like.
Well, I don't understand in terms of what was the reasosoning that they wouldn't renew your
just trying to
charter? I
ask,
mean,
you know,
you're doing
what's
better
wrong?
than what the city of Troy schools are.
Basically, we've, you know, appealed it because we felt that we had been dealt an injustice, that we had met our standards under the charter, we had met our contract with the state, and that they had changed the standard by which they were judging schools during the course of our charter, and it was being held against us unfairly. And we could point back to a school that just the previous year had scores that were comparable to ours, in fact, I think slightly lower than ours, that got a 5-year charter with permission to expand. So we felt it was arbitrary, it was capricious, and it was, you know, just bad administration.
And why? But what was it? What was their decision based on?
They
in terms
wouldn't
of,
tell us.
They wouldn't tell you.
What you say is that they determined that our academic, you know, performance wasn't what it should be. You know, no one in the committee.
I mean, what do they, if there's test scores, aren't they? I mean,
There
can't
are,
they
but
just-
what they do is then they take them and they sort of run them through a bunch of statistical exercises, and they decide that this means that. You know, to some degree they were using, you know, we felt unfairly the Common Core results, which, you know, for other schools they didn't use. Again, it was a very arbitrary process. They very clearly said they were not going to use those scores because the scores were too volatile. This is earlier in the year. They said the scores were too volatile. They said it was the Common Core for 2012-13 was only being used as a baseline, and then they turned around and used that to beat us over the head.
Can your assemblyman or senator or any of the elected officials intervene to try to?
They were not, you know,
They didn't want
so
to?
What
motivated.
about the parents themselves? That would be your
Well,
bigger,
we
I mean, make a protest.
we did protest. We had a petition with about 1,400 signatures on it. We had, you know, the editorial board of the Times-Union came out, you know, suggesting very strongly that, you know, that this decision was being rushed and was not being consistent. You know,
What
wasn't
about the Troy Record?
Troy Record has been enormously supportive. The editorial board did not particularly take a position.
Okay. And, I mean, all this money that you've put in, all the time, energy, and effort, you must feel so deflated, right? You know, yeah.
We are heartbroken.
Yeah.
It was unfair, and you know, I feel personally disappointed, but that doesn't matter. It's 220 kids who are getting a phenomenal education. One of the things you can say, just based on the numbers, based on the test scores, based on historical performance, is we were doing great work with a group that has historically been underserved by the city of Troy.
Mm-hmm.
And now they will go back to schools. The majority of our kids go back to schools that even in the Common Core year, we outperformed. So we didn't outperform the whole district during the Common Core year, but those schools, the majority of our students will go back to, we outperformed.
This is incredible. I mean, we're always, we have people in the community and we're trying to, again, how to cut down crime, how to cut down drug abuse. Obviously these are major issues. Finally, someone's successful and they cut it out.
The sheriff of Rensselaer County wrote an article, a letter to the editor in the Times-Union suggesting that, keeping our school would be a positive force for, fighting crime in the region.
Yeah, for sure.
It defies common sense. It's not, it's simply not fair.
Talk about 3 men in a room. This is 3 men in a room.
One of the men, really, was listening and was moved by the arguments, and
Did you?
but two weren't.
I mean, I mean this respectfully, and just coming at it from a naive question. But did you piss someone off? That
We might have, but our job is to educate the kids, not to make nice with
Right. Or political people. Yeah.
I don't think we pissed anyone off on the state level, but the Charter Schools Institute probably didn't like us very much, particularly when we appealed their decision, and I think made them look like fools.
Yeah. What about the Charter School Association?
Charter School Association, which is the trade group, came out very clearly in support of us.
Obviously, they would.
Well, no, not exactly, because they really believe, and Bill Phillips, who's the head of it, is very consistently on point that they feel that underperforming charter schools should be closed, that the strength of the charter school movement depends in part on underperforming charter schools being closed. And he is very consistent with that point of view. That said, he came out and said that closing our school was a mistake and was an injustice.
Who funded the lawsuits that you?
We did.
The Board of Trustees?
Not the Board of Trustees. We have money from our leftover an operating surplus, basically.
Oh, you do?
Yeah.
So, and what was your operating budget?
It's a little over, I'm guessing, a little over $3 million a year.
Okay. Now, what happened? How do you close out the books? How do you?
We pay off our debts.
Yeah.
We liquidate our assets, and then whatever is left goes to the Troy School District.
Goes back to the school district?
Giving up hope over here, Mark. Isn't there someone to override?
Governor Cuomo.
Really, that would be. Isn't the head of the education department in New York State?
No, this was a decision by the Court of Appeals, which is the state's highest court.
But state ed has no authority over the decisions of the SUNY board on charter schools. In the same fashion, SUNY charter schools has no say over the decision of state ed in charter school matters. They're co-equal, so there's not one authority that reports to the other.
That's such a shame. That's such
It
a
is.
shame. How much of the money personally have you put in when you came in? And did you put any money in?
We didn't need to put in money
You
personally.
didn't?
I mean,
Okay.
the thing about charter schools
Just
is,
curious.
unless you get involved in grand building
building grand
ventures, which we didn't. We bought a 180-year-old, 150-year-old closed parochial school from the diocese. We started out renting it. We got funding from some local foundations and from the state, or federal money actually, administered through the state to renovate it. It's very, very adequate to our purposes, but we were able to, operate it with, we don't have a mortgage, we own it outright. So we are, we don't have, we don't have exorbitant salaries. We pay teachers, the going rate, though we do give them medical insurance. We do contribute to the teacher retirement fund. They get the same benefits they would get in a district public school, but without tenure, because we can't, particularly grant that with a 5-year time frame.
Right. It's just this leaves you speechless when.
And
the Court of Appeals doesn't want to even hear.
They have to make their decision on very, very narrow grounds. The state charter school law specifies that the decision of the institute cannot be appealed. It seems on the face of it to be unconstitutional, but the lower court judge wouldn't touch it, ran out of time before it could be appealed further.
Right, right. Personally, what do you do when you're not fighting for the charter schools?
Well, I'm a literary agent.
Okay.
My office is in Chatham, New York.
Chatham.
Yeah.
And what do you do as a literary agent?
Represent book writers.
Uh-huh. Do you help them with getting their books not just published, but edited down?
I don't work as an editor. Some agents get more involved in that area. I'm more just a business manager for them.
Business manager.
How is the book business nowadays?
Book business is pretty complicated and troubled these days.
Well, for hard copies.
For ebooks as well. Amazon, who controls about 65% of the ebook market, is putting the screws to some of the big publishers, and could have a very wide-ranging effect on.
In which way?
publishers.
What do you mean?
They're trying to get a larger share of the revenue.
Of the publishing part of it.
Yeah, they're trying to basically, siphon off a lot of the publisher profit.
Hmm. And do you belong to any congregations? Or?
We belong to a number of congregations, none currently.
But I mean, up here,
Oh, yeah,
do you
yeah, yeah.
gravitate towards one or the other? Because Chatham has a synagogue,
Yep.
Nassau,
we
Hudson.
belong to
So-
the Nassau synagogue for a
Okay.
while, which we liked a lot. Then we were at Hebron, Great Barrington, then the Reconstructionist synagogue in
Mhm.
Great Barrington. Now we're sort of between synagogues,
Okay.
as they say.
Well, and your family, how many kids?
I have two kids, a 21-year-old and a 30-year-old.
Oh, and
a
you're
wife.
29.
I'm 29, yeah.
Hey, that's my age. It was a good year. That's what we say. It's a good year for all of us.
So, are you a cultural Jew? Are you just?
Yeah, I would have to describe myself that
Mhm.
way.
Yeah, I find that a lot down in Columbia County also, because on my website, I have over 870 Jewish-owned businesses and professionals listed, which I got to add you now. And one of the people I called to find out, it was a Jewish-sounding name. I called to verify, and they said, "Oh, well, we raise pigs, something in boar." It was like, and we raise pigs, and I don't think you're going to want us in that on the website. I said, "No. A Jew is a Jew. I'm not asking for your level of observance. I don't care what how you make a living. That I'm not getting into anything personal. I just want to know, do you identify as being Jewish?" And she goes, "Yes, I can't deny my heritage." And there she is on the website.
What's your pity?
So, they do have that. But anyhow, I just thought on an aside, what...
Well, Jewish people are into education. That's more of a
that
Jewish
is,
profession.
absolutely.
I always say that's a very interesting idea where, of course, you see charter schools or public school, and it's totally American. Every child, no matter poverty, intelligence, doesn't make a difference who you are, deserves a good education. But that really is, the whole thing is 200 years old in America. I mean, obviously there's, I'm sure, millions of kids around the world that don't even get an education. So it's really, even for some places, cutting edge. But 3,300 years ago, it says in the Bible, "Shinat levanecha," you should teach to your child. Meaning that every child, it was a Jewish tradition thousands of years ago, not just a few hundred years ago, that every child deserves an education. So that's made the Jewish people know they're brainy, they're Albert Einstein people, the Chinese people call them, because they are intellectual and they are education's so important for a Jewish family. So it's really a Jewish profession to educate everybody.
At the Arc Community Charter School, can you reinvent it now and then reapply and do something fresh? Arc 2?
I hope we can do
Noah's
something.
Ark.
Noah's
Ark.
I don't know exactly what we'll do. As a group, we've been in effect, ordered to disband.
That's right.
What people will go on and doing, I'm sure, is for a lot of people, this was a mission as well as a job, and they will continue.
But can you reinvent and over the summer and do something?
Not in time
No?
for the fall. I can't
Not in
imagine.
time for the fall.
And it would be.
Because you know the process.
We know the process. We might have burned some bridges by bucking the system and by not accepting the verdict, however unfair it was.
So there is some it's not all objective analysis. There's some subjectivity to it, that if you go through this process of whether the initial application should be accepted or not, that they just don't look at the merits, they look at other things.
I think what you saw when Eva Moskowitz came up to Albany in January, February, and Governor Cuomo showed up at her rally,
Yes.
snubbing Mayor de Blasio in the
Yes.
first weeks of his,
Administration,
mayoralty. It's a very political process, as well as, I mean, there's real education that goes on, there's real politics that goes on. Charter schools have always been a very political, outgrowth of different, both Republican and Democratic issues. It's always been a funny movement in that a lot of the people, who sort of pushed the legislation through were Republicans, but obviously Democrats also supported it. So it's both bipartisan and sort of skitsy. But it's very political.
So that's what you mean by burning bridges.
Well, the members of the SUNY trustees that who were on that committee were all political appointees of the governor.
So could the state ed? Could you go through state ed to get rechartered and
we
avoid
could.
the SUNY end of it?
We could. I don't know if there would be political issues that would raise. I simply
You
don't
don't know.
I don't
but
know.
Can you try? I mean,
We could try.
Okay. You don't know, but you don't know if you're going to try yet.
I don't know if we're going to try yet.
But
And
you
we,
have-
we literally found out today that our last appeal was basically exhausted.
I understand, but I'm saying that do you have the will and the koyach, the strength inside of you to want to maybe to look forward to this and to maybe reorganize?
I think the answer is depends. It would depend on whether the state ed would agree with our vision of what a charter school should be. We felt, educating any kid who walked in the door,
Yeah.
however needy they might be, however deficient their previous education was, and being judged on that basis was our compact with the state. If they would agree with that, that'd be great. If they
And
wouldn't,
these
it wouldn't.
200 kids will just be in public school for the most part.
For the most part, yeah.
So it says, and on the, it says here, there are certain questions. What are the school's goals? Is the school meeting its goals? What does the school expect from every student? Is the school doing better academically in the district the school the child attends? And how long has the school been open? But, do you think the school's charter will be renewed? How do parents know if the school is doing well? How will the charter school help my child succeed? I mean, there's all these types of questions which seem pretty objective.
And the application can be completely subjective.
Oh, okay. Well, I think that's what makes it
Political.
a challenge.
Yes.
And maybe if you get the right attorney to represent you.
We had attorneys as good as they come. It was the law that was a problem.
Yeah. So
we had sympathetic, judges. We had
is
great attorneys.
Billy Easton from Alliance Equality Education? Is he on the other side of the
I
fence?
don't know
or-
the name.
You don't know the name. Okay. Because I'm just wondering who else you could engage to make this successful for you. But you've done it all. It seems.
I think we've exhausted the possibilities. Sadly,
It just seems such a shame that
we've been fighting this since November.
November. So it's been 8 months or so.
Yeah.
And that must have been that must have been draining, which is
It was, I'm not in the school every day, so much less for me than for the leadership and the faculty and the kids. I mean, the stress the kids were under, not knowing if they were coming back to the school in the fall, not knowing if they were going to be, if they're a second grade, if they're going to be going into third grade and working with that teacher. It's a small community.
and now they don't have a chance for closure to say goodbye
Yeah.
unless you open up the school for one day so parents can
Yes,
bring
the
them.
kids that lose, that's the worst.
Yeah.
Listen, Dad, Steve, you've been doing good work, and we give you a blessing that you should continue the good work. That's what Mark's trying to push you to keep on going, because you're a good man, and you did a lot for a lot of children. It's, again, a shame for the children, but continue to do good things for the community and do it with good health.
All the
Thank
best
you.
of success in
Thank
the
you very
future.
much. Thank you.